Welcome back, brave souls, to another descent into the shadows of Luna's crypt. I'm your host, Luna, your guide through the dark and twisted corners of this haunted world. Tonight, I've prepared a new batch of spine-tingling tales, each more unsettling than the last. So, lock your doors, dim the lights, and prepare yourselves for stories that will send shivers down your spine. The crypt is open once more, and its secrets are eager to be revealed, if you dare to listen. Let's begin, shall we? The Feast of Eternal Hunger. In a distant village nestled deep in the mountains, there was an old legend whispered among the townsfolk. It spoke of an ancient banquet, a feast so rich and plentiful that those who attended it were never seen again. Some said it was a blessing, others a curse. The tale had been passed down for generations, but few believed it anymore. That is, until a man named Jonas found an invitation in his letterbox. Jonas was a simple man, a farmer struggling to keep his land and feed his family. His crops had failed that season, and hunger gnawed at him and his children. The invitation seemed like a cruel joke at first, a golden card embossed with elegant script. You are cordially invited to the Feast of Eternal Hunger. There was no address, no sender, only the date and the time. A glimmer of hope sparked in Jonas. Could it be real? Could this be the answer to his prayers? Food in abundance? Enough to fill his belly, his family's bellies. Despite his better judgment, curiosity won out. As the date approached, the thought of food, of a feast, became all-consuming. On the appointed night, Jonas set out on foot, guided only by the light of the full moon. The path was one he'd never seen before, winding through the woods as if it had appeared just for him. Trees loomed overhead, their gnarled branches reaching like twisted fingers. The air grew colder, the night unnaturally quiet, save for the sound of his footsteps crunching leaves beneath his boots. After what felt like hours of walking, Jonas arrived at an enormous mansion hidden deep in the forest. It was grand, far more than any house he'd ever seen, its towering spires piercing the night sky. Candlelight flickered in the windows, casting an inviting glow. He hesitated, but hunger urged him forward. As he approached the door, it opened on its own with a low, creaking groan. Inside, the mansion was opulent, its walls lined with rich tapestries and golden candelabras. The scent of roasted meats and fresh bread filled the air, making Jonas's mouth water. A grand dining hall stretched before him, a table set with an endless array of food. Every dish imaginable, juicy meats, warm pies, fresh fruits, piled high, more than he could ever dream of eating. At the head of the table sat a figure shrouded in darkness, their face obscured by a heavy hood. "Welcome, Jonas," the figure rasped, their voice low and melodic. "We've been expecting you. Sit, feast, as much as your heart desires." Jonas hesitated, but the gnawing hunger inside him was too much. He sat at the table and tore into the food with reckless abandon. Every bite was more delicious than the last. Tender meats that melted in his mouth, bread that was warm and soft, desserts so sweet they sent shivers down his spine. The hooded figure watched in silence, never moving, as Jonas ate and ate. Hours passed, and still he could not stop. His stomach swelled, his body growing heavy, but the food kept calling to him. The more he ate, the hungrier he became. His hunger, rather than being sated, grew more insatiable with every bite. Suddenly, Jonas noticed something strange. The food began to lose its taste. The once juicy meat turned dry and flavorless. The sweet desserts became bitter. Yet he could not stop. His hands moved mechanically, shoveling food into his mouth, but it brought him no satisfaction. The hooded figure at the head of the table chuckled softly. "You see, Jonas," the figure whispered, "this is no ordinary feast. This is the Feast of Eternal Hunger. You wanted food, but what you found is a hunger that will never end." Jonas tried to stop, tried to pull his hands away, but it was too late. His body had been overtaken by the curse. His hunger became a gnawing, aching pain that consumed him. No matter how much he ate, he would never be full again. The once delicious feast now turned to ash in his mouth, and yet he was compelled to keep eating, his body growing weaker, his mind unraveling. Days passed, though Jonas could no longer tell time. His once strong frame withered, skin stretched thin over bones, but still, the food never ran out. The table remained full, the feast eternal. And so Jonas was doomed to sit there, devouring food that would never satisfy, cursed to feel the pain of hunger forever. The hooded figure finally stood and approached Jonas, its face still hidden in shadow. "Greed is a terrible thing, is it not?" the figure said, almost gently. "You wanted too much, and now you shall have it. Forever." With that, the figure turned and left Jonas alone in the grand hall, the sound of his chewing echoing through the empty mansion. Outside, the moon disappeared behind dark clouds, and the forest grew still once more. Jonas was never seen again, but the legend of the Feast of Eternal Hunger lived on, a warning to all those who sought more than they needed. And if you ever find yourself in the woods on a cold, moonlit night, beware of strange invitations, for you might just find yourself at a feast where the price is far higher than you can imagine. Well, dear listener, that was a real treat, almost as sweet as dessert. But be careful, too much sugar can leave you with a bad taste, just like our last guest. Anyway, let's not spoil the night. On to our next tale of brooding misfortune. The Wine of Eternal Youth. In a small, quiet town nestled between rolling hills, there was a vineyard known for its exceptional wine. The locals called it Vino Vitae, the wine of life. It was said that a single glass could restore one's youth, erasing the marks of time, but only the wealthiest could afford even a sip. The vineyard was owned by a mysterious man named Victor Arnault, who had lived there for as long as anyone could remember, his face always unlined, his hair dark and thick. Some whispered that he was centuries old. For years, the townsfolk speculated about the secret behind the wine. How could it possess such power? And why did Victor remain untouched by age while others grew older and frailer? No one dared ask him, for Victor rarely spoke to anyone outside his estate. He simply watched as customers came and went, paying a fortune for a bottle, leaving with the hope of staving off death a little longer. One day, a young woman named Celia arrived at the vineyard. She was beautiful, vibrant, but her heart was heavy. She came not for herself, but for her mother, whose illness had left her frail and dying. Celia begged Victor for just one glass of the miraculous wine. "My mother," she said, her voice trembling, "is fading. I've heard of your wine and its power. Please help her." Victor studied her for a long time, his piercing green eyes unreadable. "The wine is not for everyone," he said finally. "Its effects are unpredictable, and the price, it is high." "I'll pay whatever it takes," Celia insisted, pulling out a pouch of coins. "Whatever you ask." Victor waved away the money. "The price is not always measured in gold, child. Are you sure you understand what you ask?" Celia nodded, desperate. "Anything. Just save her." Victor disappeared into the cellar and returned with a single bottle, its glass dark and cold. "One glass," he warned. "No more. Take care, for too much of a good thing can be a curse in disguise." Celia thanked him profusely and rushed home, her heart soaring with hope. That night, she poured a glass for her mother, carefully measuring out the wine as instructed. Her mother's frail hands trembled as she drank it, but within minutes, her cheeks regained color, her eyes brightened, and her strength returned. It was nothing short of a miracle. But the next morning, Celia found her mother sitting by the window, a strange look in her eyes. "Celia," her mother whispered, "I feel strange. I need more." Celia hesitated. Victor had warned her, one glass, no more, but her mother was insistent, her hands shaking with need. "Just a little more, dear. I feel it fading. I must have more." Against her better judgment, Celia poured a second glass, watching in disbelief as her mother drank it eagerly. The effect was immediate. Her mother's skin became smooth, her hair darkened, and the illness seemed to vanish entirely. But as the hours passed, her mother's hunger for the wine only grew. The next day she demanded more, her voice desperate, her once gentle demeanor now sharp and unrecognizable. Each sip of the wine made her younger, but something was changing. Her eyes, once kind, turned cold. Her laughter, once warm, grew hollow. Celia realized, with growing dread, that the wine was not just restoring her mother's youth, it was taking something else in return. Days turned into weeks, and Celia's mother, once frail and at death's door, now seemed to defy the very passage of time. Her skin was as smooth as porcelain, her hair thick and lustrous, and her once weak body moved with a grace that reminded Celia of her mother's youth. But there was something deeply wrong, something that made Celia's heart race with unease. Her mother had become cold. The warmth that had once filled their home was gone. Conversations grew short, punctuated by sharp demands. She no longer seemed interested in anything except the wine. Each morning, before Celia had even risen, her mother would be pacing by the cabinet, waiting impatiently for her next glass. The once kind woman was now a shadow of herself, obsessed only with prolonging her unnatural youth. One evening, when the last bottle of the wine ran dry, her mother grew frantic. She tore through the kitchen, opening every drawer, every cupboard, desperate to find another drop. "Celia," she shrieked, "you must go back to the vineyard. I need more." Celia shook her head. "Mother, it's gone. Victor warned us. There's no more." But her mother wouldn't listen. Her once beautiful face twisted with rage, her eyes burning with a terrifying hunger. "I will die without it," she screamed. "You must get more." Celia, terrified and confused, fled the house. She ran through the dark streets of the town, her feet pounding the cobblestones as she made her way back to Victor's vineyard. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the vineyard as she arrived, breathless and desperate. Victor was waiting for her at the gate. "I told you," he said, his voice calm yet sorrowful. "The wine comes with a price. You were warned." "Please," Celia begged, "you have to help me. My mother, she's changed. She's not the same. There has to be a way to fix this." Victor regarded her with a long, hard look before finally nodding. "There is one way," he said, leading her deep into the vineyard, where the air grew thick with the scent of grapes and earth. "But it is dangerous. The wine must be purged from her system. If she continues to drink it, she will lose more than just her warmth. She will lose her humanity." They stopped at the entrance to the old wine cellar, the door creaking open to reveal rows of barrels. At the center of the room was a single, ancient cask, the source of the cursed wine. Victor placed a hand on the cask, his expression dark. "This is where the magic comes from. The vineyard is older than you can imagine. Its roots go deep into the earth, to places man was never meant to reach. The wine draws from that power, but it is not meant for us. It consumes those who drink too much." Celia's stomach churned. "Then how do we stop it?" Victor handed her a vial filled with a thick, black liquid. "She must drink this. It will purge the wine from her body. But beware, she will fight it. The wine will not let go easily." Celia took the vial, her hands trembling. "And if I don't?" Victor's eyes darkened. "Then she will become something else, something not human." Celia rushed home, clutching the vial to her chest. When she arrived, the house was eerily silent. Her mother sat in the parlor, staring blankly into the fire. Her youthful appearance was still there, but her eyes, they were empty. "Mother," Celia whispered, stepping closer, "I brought something for you." Her mother turned slowly, her gaze cold and unrecognizing. "Where's the wine, Celia? I need it." "This will help you," Celia said, holding out the vial. "It will make you better." But her mother's face twisted into a snarl. "You think I'm a fool. I know what you're trying to do. You want to take my youth away. You want me to grow old and die, just like everyone else." Before Celia could react, her mother lunged at her, her movements inhumanly fast. Celia stumbled back, the vial slipping from her fingers and crashing to the floor. The black liquid spilled across the wooden planks, and her mother screamed, a sound so piercing and unnatural that it made Celia's blood run cold. Her mother's hands clawed at her face, her youthful skin beginning to bubble and crack as though something beneath it was trying to escape. "You did this," she shrieked, her voice distorted, no longer her own. "You took it from me." Celia, horrified, scrambled to her feet and ran. But as she reached the door, a final cry echoed through the house. When she turned back, the room was empty, save for the shattered vial and the faint scent of wine lingering in the air. Ah, dear listeners, quite the vintage tale, wouldn't you say? Sweet, dry, and just a touch tart, like a fine wine aged in the depths of forgotten magic. But as with any indulgence, too much can turn sour, so sip carefully and let the aftertaste linger a while. Now, brace yourselves for our next chilling tale, one where even the sweetest of pleasures can rot away at the soul. Shall we? The Gift of Forever. In a forgotten town, nestled between rolling hills and dark forests, there lived a woman named Margot, renowned for her beauty and her unquenchable desire for perfection. Her garden was the envy of all, her home an immaculate palace of refined taste, and her own appearance, flawless without a single blemish. Yet, no matter how much praise she received, Margot yearned for more. She wished to hold on to that perfection forever. One day, a mysterious stranger arrived at her door. He was an elderly man, stooped with age, his eyes sharp beneath the shadows of his hood. He carried a box, delicately wrapped in crimson silk, which he offered her as a gift. "I have something for you," he said in a voice that rasped like dry leaves, "something that will give you what you seek." Margot's heart fluttered. She had never spoken of her deepest desire to anyone. "What is it? Open it and see." She tore away the silk, revealing a mirror unlike any she had seen before. Its frame was intricately carved with symbols she couldn't recognize, yet felt strangely familiar. The glass was dark, almost black, but when she gazed into it, her reflection shimmered, ageless, immortal, perfect. "This mirror holds great power," the old man warned. "It will grant you eternal beauty, but at a price. Are you willing to pay?" Without hesitation, Margot agreed. She had spent her entire life chasing perfection, and now it was within her grasp. Days turned to weeks, and weeks into months, yet Margot's appearance never changed. Her skin remained flawless, her hair gleaming, her youth eternal. She became the object of fascination, not only in her town but far beyond, with people traveling from distant lands just to catch a glimpse of her. But soon, Margot began to notice something was wrong. While her body remained perfect, the world around her started to decay. The flowers in her garden wilted, no longer responding to her careful tending. Her home grew cold and damp, despite her every effort to keep it pristine. People, once in awe of her beauty, now whispered and averted their eyes when she passed. One night, unable to sleep, Margot wandered through her withering garden. The moon cast an eerie glow over the twisted branches and dead flowers. She heard a rustling and turned to see the old man standing at the edge of her property. "I gave you what you wanted," he said softly, "but you never asked what it would cost." "I've paid the price," Margot snapped. "Everything around me is falling apart." The man shook his head. "You have not yet begun to pay." And then he was gone, leaving only his words lingering in the cold night air. The next morning, Margot awoke to find a crack in her mirror, the mirror that had once reflected only her perfection. She reached out, her fingers brushing against the crack, and was horrified to see her own skin ripple and wrinkle beneath her touch. Her flawless exterior began to crumble. She ran to the townspeople for help, but no one would come near her. They looked upon her with disgust and fear, murmuring of a curse that had befallen her. Desperate, she returned home and locked herself away with the mirror, hoping to repair the damage. But as the days passed, the cracks grew, spreading across the glass and her skin alike. With each passing day, Margot's reflection became more grotesque. Her once beautiful face twisted and aged far beyond her years. Her body, though still functioning, now bore the weight of centuries. She could feel the years she had avoided pressing down upon her all at once. In a panic, she smashed the mirror, but instead of shattering, it reformed instantly, the cracks growing deeper, darker, until the entire surface was nothing but a web of broken glass. Margot was trapped, her beauty stolen, her soul bound to the cursed mirror. The people of the town spoke of her no more. The woman, who once dazzled the world with her perfection, was now a ghost, a warning to all who sought more than they were meant to have. And so Margot remained forever, gazing into the broken mirror, seeing only the reflection of a woman who had paid too high a price for too much of a good thing. Ah, dear listeners, a tale with cracks that run deep, quite literally, wouldn't you say? Margot's pursuit of eternal beauty might have left her shattered, but for us, well, it certainly cracks me up. You see, too much of a good thing often leaves you in pieces. Well, dear listeners, that brings us to the end of another delightfully dark episode. I hope tonight's tales were just the right amount of too much, a little reminder that perfection, immortality, and indulgence come with their own sinister price tags. But don't despair. There are many more stories where these came from. Remember, all of my books are available on Amazon. Just search for Luna Parnell and dive into worlds even more twisted than the ones we explore here. And for those of you who just can't get enough of the eerie and the macabre, all my podcasts will be permanently available on YouTube. You'll find sneak peeks, behind-the-scenes insights, and even more great works waiting for you in the crypt. So, be sure to subscribe and keep the darkness close at hand. Until next time, my dear listeners, sweet dreams, if you dare.